been a bleak few weeks with nearly 2,000 jobs proposed to be scrapped in the public sector. This is just the beginning. More are expected to be axed as the recession really bites. Cuts are being made across the board.
More people are out of work, with young people among the hardest hit. Overall, over the past year, the number of people out of work has jumped from 33,000 to 143,000. And that figure includes more Māori now jobless.
A meatworks that has operated in Timaru for 140 years will shut its doors by the end of the year, leaving 600 people out of work. It's a huge blow to the workers and the wider community, with the meatworks responsible for around 3% of the town's GDP.
2024 was a devastating year of bleak employment headlines back to back to back. And any hope for a happy new year? Well, that's already fizzling.
It can't get worse. That's how one recruitment consultant has described the job market as we get set for the start of the work year. Job seekers are entering 2025 with rising unemployment, an economy in recession, and with far fewer public service jobs.
Unemployment in New Zealand is forecast to soar back to pandemic levels, rising from 4.8% in the last quarter to 5.3% as a year average this year. It's brutal, particularly for those who have already lost their job and can't find a new one.
I was made redundant in July. I've applied for 73 jobs and I'm still looking.
Kia ora, I'm Amanda Gillies, and on The Detail today, unemployment and our volatile job market. What's happening now, what's predicted, and what's the potential fallout for the country?
There was a data entry job that I applied for, and I looked down the bottom of the application, and this was about a day after it had been up, and there were 1,900 plus applications. So the numbers are against you.
That's Aucklander Ant Tala, who is hunting hard for a job right now after being made redundant from a job he loved. More from him in a moment. But first, Shay Peters, Australia-New Zealand CEO of Robert Walters, an international recruitment agency. He's watching the rising unemployment rate and fallout closely.
It's a scary thought. I think there's a lot of talented New Zealanders that we're going to see on the open job market. And what I think one of the ramifications of that will be that talented New Zealanders look to move offshore. And we're seeing that recently in survey results that we've just recently released with, we surveyed mid to senior level professionals in New Zealand, and almost 42% of those individuals are open to relocation this year, and mostly to Australia. So the long-term ramifications of that quite scary in terms of a talent vacuum.
We've heard a lot about the brain drain, with a record 80,000 New Zealand citizens moving overseas in the past year.
A wave of Kiwis are walking away from New Zealand and considering calling Australia home.
Everything I like about Auckland, a city in Australia is doing it better.
A new poll from the Post and Freshwater Strategy shows that 1 in 3 New Zealanders have seriously considered a move across the ditch in the last year.
They talk about this brain drain. What impact does that have on our market when we lose these great brains to Australia?
Yeah, well, my biggest concern is the profile, the demographic of those we're losing. So previously, as we know, New Zealanders look to do an OE, go offshore, gain experience, and bring that experience back to New Zealand when they're a little bit older and ready to have families. But my biggest concern at the moment is that those looking to move offshore aren't limited to just the young people with a couple of years' experience. We're actually losing now mid to senior level professionals and their families. Now, those moves are often more well thought out, they're considered, and they're long-term moves. So that is my biggest concern. And the long-term scenario here is a little bit scary for New Zealand.
What is Australia offering that we're not? What is so good about moving to Australia?
Well, there's a couple of different things. The way the central bank in Australia dealt with inflation was a lot less aggressive than the way that the central bank in New Zealand did. So inflation had an impact in New Zealand, and we saw the central government really increase interest rates quite aggressively. And so that's put New Zealand into a deeper recession, and that's harder to come out of. And that impacts psyche again and the levels of aspiration. What Australia did was slightly different. So yes, it increased interest rates from a central bank perspective, but it was far less aggressive and slightly more moderate. So what we're seeing is a slightly more positive sentiment in Australia. So that's one thing. The other aspect in Australia is that they simply offer better salaries and better wages than what we're able to in New Zealand. So New Zealanders at the moment are looking at a very high cost of living. That's impacting them. They're looking at a potential year where they're not going to get a salary increase or a wage increase that's going to match the cost of living. So what the net impact of that is New Zealanders are now looking offshore. They can find a closer home in Australia. They don't need to go to the UK or the US to be able to do that. They can go to almost a nearshore opportunity with a very very short flight back to New Zealand to see family and friends. But there's a lot that Australia has to offer at the moment that New Zealand just simply can't compete with.
When you talk about salaries, I'm hearing some businesses here are advertising senior positions but paying junior wages because they can. There's such a glut. There are so many applications for the job. Is that true?
I haven't seen that personally through our business at the moment. What we do see, often organisations will have pay grades or pay scales. What we're seeing are those businesses or organisations that are looking to hire. They're simply looking to hire at the bottom of that scale, but not necessarily being able to pay bottom-end wages. So I'm not sure that's exactly true.
That's good to know. You advertise a job, though, today, Shay. What sort of response are you getting? How many applications are you receiving? And, even compared to, say, a year ago?
Oh, hundreds more per application, without a doubt. And that's just a product of supply and demand. But it shows how the job market has dramatically shifted over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. We've seen a labour market that has gone from bust to boom very sharply, and then we're slowly tapering off, and now we're seeing it in a bust scenario again, and that's having an impact in obviously in terms of the number of job applicants that we're seeing. But with a lot of New Zealanders looking to move offshore and a lot of talented New Zealanders, if that actually comes to fruition, we may see a talent vacuum again, and obviously the net impact of that. We'll see higher salaries needing to be offered to be able to attract a smaller number of applicants. So that cycle may yet turn again in the near future.
How desperate, though, are people getting? What lengths are they going to, Shay, to get a job at the moment?
Like I said, they're looking at all possible avenues. So some people are willing to look at significantly decreased wages and salaries. So contractors that have been working very consistently over the past 4 or 5 years are now looking at fixed term or permanent opportunities, and that's a significantly decreased salary scenario for them. So that's one aspect of the labour market at the moment. People are looking at potentially applying for more junior roles than what their experience base is to allow them an opportunity to simply get a salary if they're not currently employed. So that's another significant move that we're seeing from the labour market, something we haven't experienced really in the last 4 years. And as I said, other applicants are now willing to think about mobile opportunities or relocation, whether that's in-country to different regions, whether that's working completely virtually or mobile for another organisation across either in a different location or a different country, or simply relocating and making that bold step. So all of those things are compounding and having a net impact on the psyche or the levels of aspiration of our labour market.
I've spoken to a guy, he's applied for 73 jobs since September last year to no avail. Some of these jobs are being re-advertised. Are employers being too picky? Is there sort of a luxury they have at the moment where, they're just going to wait for the right person? There's no sort of desperation for employers at the moment?
There is no desperation, and they're looking to tick 11 out of 10 boxes. So they are looking for the absolutely perfect candidate that they're going to be able to pop into their organisation, and they've got the luxury to be able to wait. Because at the same time, they're trying to keep costs down. So it has to be an 11 out of 10 at the moment to get a role. And like you mentioned, that job applicant is not alone. There are thousands of people within that same kind of bracket.
That job applicant is Ant Towler, a former colleague of mine. He lost his long-term full-time job as an overnight on-air coordinator for Warner Brothers Discovery, a casualty of the News Hub closure last year.
It's the end of the news as we know it. In a meeting with staff this morning, Three's owners, Warner Brothers Discovery, confirmed the closure of our news service, News Hub, with the loss of nearly 300 jobs and more than half of them from the news team.
It was the second time I'd been made redundant from Warner Brothers, strangely enough. I just sank because I knew how much the company had meant to me. Like the people that I worked with, they were really special. I wasn't worried about me. And the last time I'd been made redundant, I was unemployed for about 3 months. So I kind of wasn't worried in that way, but I was worried about other people.
Having been made redundant before and getting a job within 3 months or so, did you feel confident after this one that you would pick up a job fairly quickly and easily?
Yeah, I did. I started thinking about life outside of broadcasting. I had a look at all my crossover skills, which I thought I had a lot of. And I thought 3 months, 4 or 5 maybe. But I expected to be employed by this time. I would say I lost the job in July. And it's January now. I thought I would have been employed maybe around September, October, is what I was looking at.
So since you were made redundant, how many jobs have you applied for?
Around September, I started counting the job applications and I started a document called My Job Journey. And at the last count, that was 73 jobs since September 9.
And how many of those 73 have you had a yes from or any response from?
Maybe 20 or 30 I've had a proper response from where they've sent me the next stage of employment. But to give you an idea how tough it is, I used to work in talkback radio where I answered 100 to 130 calls a night as a producer. And that was also midnight till 6, I think. So I applied just last week for an overnight call centre job. And I just got an email back going, you have no experience.
So 73 jobs you've applied for, 73 no's. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Wow. How does that make you feel, Anne?
That's a bit of a process that I think at first it's quite crushing because you think, oh, I probably should have got that. But I think what I've realized is there are a lot of people unemployed at the moment, and there are a lot of skilled people that are unemployed. So if you're in recruitment and you've got someone that's got 5 years experience that just got laid off, then you're going to pick that 5 years of experience up and slot them into your system. And that's this thing that's beyond my control. The reason I started the job journey document was to remind myself I am trying and I am doing things, and these are my successes and these are my failures. And it just is enough to keep me going.
Because you're not being fussy. You're going right across the board, aren't you? You're applying for all sorts of jobs.
Yeah, I'm averaging, I think at one point I was averaging 7 jobs a week, maybe more, that I was applying for.
The jobs range from library assistant to lotto customer service consultant, banking consultant to council control room operator. Of the 73 job applications, he's had just 6 in-person interviews. On occasion, he's reapplied for jobs that have been re-advertised.
Sometimes when you apply for a job on Seek, you can see the number of applications. And I remember distinctly there was a data entry job that I applied for. And I looked down the bottom of the application, and this was about a day after it had been up, and there were 1,900 plus applications for that one job. So the numbers are against you.
Ant has cerebral palsy, which he believes can also work against him. And he's turning 50 next month, so there's the age factor. Do you fear you won't get a job, though? Is that a real concern for you at the moment?
No, I will.
You're confident?
Like I say, I think at the moment the numbers of unemployed must be huge.
Well, the unemployment rate has risen again to a near 4-year high of 4.8%. That's up from 4.6% in the previous quarter. There are now 148,000 people in New Zealand out of work, reflecting the tough economic environment for businesses.
And there's a lot of experienced people out there. You look at all the public servants that just got laid off. All those people are skilled in areas, and some of them are definitely going to take a pay cut just to be working. That's all beyond my control.
You're happy to take a pay cut?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything to get off the job seeker benefit, which provides him about $350 a week, enough to cover costs, just.
I've actually written a short film in the time that I've been unemployed, and about to start writing a feature script, which every unemployed writer does.
Oh, it's good though. You're keeping busy.
Yeah. And I think that's important. I think there's only so much you can do when you are job hunting. For me, I started a routine of wake up at 7, start job hunting at 9:30, because that's when the new jobs are on Seek. So that's your best chance. And I might job hunt for 3 hours, maybe. And sometimes you'll do it in 30 minutes because there's nothing new. Sometimes you'll get 5, 6, 7 jobs. The best advice I can give anyone is if there is a job that you're halfway interested in or skilled in, then you should just apply for it. And maybe if your CV gets through early enough, because I imagine if every company's getting over 1,000 applications, they're just going to cut it off at a certain number and go, these are the ones we're going to look at. So you may as well just apply and see what happens.
What would be your ideal job, and what does that look like?
As long as I'm working somewhere where I'm respected by my colleagues, that's probably the most important thing.
Shay Peters does have some good news, some hope for Ant and other job seekers.
There's certain markets within technology that are going to continually be buoyant. And we know the use of AI is only going to grow, and that obviously we need experts within that field to be able to keep pushing AI within New Zealand, and then with its adoption into New Zealand businesses and New Zealand organisations. That's one area. Cyber security is only going to grow. We know the threat of cyber is huge, and so that's an area people with expertise in that field, I believe they're going to be continually in demand. Some professions will always be relatively candidate short, especially in New Zealand, and New Zealand provides great lawyers for export. And what I mean by that are New Zealand lawyers are well trained, they've got good experience, and so they can go offshore and earn a lot more money if they choose. And so that's a field that's always going to be in high demand within New Zealand. So there is a scarcity of labour within the areas of legal. So that's another industry that I think will continue to be buoyant. And as we know, the legal profession is fairly resilient because it can be counter-recessionary. So whilst the market is booming, areas like M&A and corporate and banking are going very strongly. And when the market turns, the legal industry starts to pick up, gets heavier demand for lawyers with expertise in employment law and insolvency. So the legal industry is also always going to be relatively candidate short, and it pays well in New Zealand, although it does actually pay better offshore.
Always, it seems the way. You talk about, I've read some of your pieces, soft skills versus hard skills. Talk us through this.
I think that with the advancement of AI, over the course of the next 2 to 5 years, we're going to see a real shift in what employees really need to hone in on in terms of their skill base. What AI is going to do, it's going to pick up a lot of admin and processing tasks of everyone's role, whether you're relatively junior or right through to senior level employees. So what employees are going to need to do to be able to show value is really hone in their soft skills. So if the hard skills are going to be machine learned by AI, then we're going to really need to develop our soft skills. And those soft skills are things like relationship management, stakeholder management, negotiation, influence. So those are the skills that are going to make an employee extremely valuable moving forwards. And that's what we're really focusing on, even within our own industry and with our own staff. We're thinking about value creation for our employees. So what I mean by value creation is, what tasks should our employees be doing? High-value tasks, low-value tasks will be picked up by AI. So really thinking about value creation. And the flow on from value creation is actually a really positive message in New Zealand. I mean, we know that productivity is a major issue. If we can move our employee base or our labour market towards value creation, then I think productivity will increase and that will help our GDP.
That sounds great. Now, I want to know, we're going to obviously have a growing number of unemployed people, it's predicted, in New Zealand. What are the best strategies for finding a job here in Aotearoa?
Well, look, I think for one, you need to understand where your value sits within an organisation that you're looking to target. Be extremely targeted on your job application as a starting point. Know the organisation that you're looking to join. Know what their values are. Try and align your CV or your resume to what those values might be, and moving forwards and thinking about what value can you bring as an employee to that organisation? What makes you stand out? I've always spoken to candidates in the labour market around really ensuring they understand their USPs or their unique selling points. So when you're looking at an organisation, understand what true value can you bring to that organisation and make that stand out in your application or your CV right on the front page. So it seems relatively basic, but actually an employer or a potential employer may not go past the first couple of pages of your resume. So don't rely on them to think about going right through your skill base and get a true understanding of what you can do. Make sure that really stands out from the outset. Another piece of advice I would do is either work with a recruitment consultancy, or even if you can find technology for yourself to be able to do this in a job application, is try and put a short video to introduce yourself as part of the front cover. If you can introduce yourself through a video, that really personalizes the job application. It also gives you a chance to talk about how your experience directly relates to that potential employer. And that can come across like you're providing a really targeted application. And it gives the employer a true understanding of your experience base behind the words or behind the paper with which they may be reading upon.
And for those of us lucky enough to be employed, but still somehow contemplating new year, new you, new job, maybe think again for 2025.
Oh, look, my advice would be to hold on at the moment. I think job security is extremely important. Now, our survey recently showed that there was a significant, I think it was something like 62% of employers looking to give salary increases for 2025. However, only 57% of employees were expecting one. And of that, a smaller percentage were expecting it to match the cost of living. That is the lowest number in a significant amount of time. What that shows me is that employees are actually just looking to hunker down. They're just looking for job security to get them through this period, and they know the market will turn at some point. And that is, the positive aspect of what we're looking at the moment. It always improves. Labour markets are cyclical. And so they know we're at a downturn at the moment, best to hunker down, find your place, have a look at other opportunities if they provide a real competitive advantage. But I think we're going to see job security be the number one motivator for our labour market this year.
That's all for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Shay Peters and Ant Towler. This episode was produced by Gwen McClure and engineered by Phil Binge. I'm Amanda Gillies. Mā te wā.